Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. Daniel McAdams is with me today. It's nice to see you.
Good morning, Dr. Paul.
Very good, Daniel. There's a major conference going on in Paris. It looks like Paris is always in the news, you know, major terrorist attack, but now there may be another attack on taxpayers on what's going on now, because all the leaders, all the important people of the world are there to talk about, the next greatest threat in the world, and that we have to address it. And of course, that's the urgent and growing threat from climate change. Yes. It used to be global warming, but since they can't prove global warming, it's climate change. But the big switch that I've seen here, it's not surprising that since everybody wants national security, they say that it's a growing threat to national security because of global weather changes. And that to me is interesting, because they rationalize that if you don't, there's going to be a lot of weather changes, and this will affect the military. But in fact, they even use the argument that if you have weather changes, what you really need is more military in order to combat it. But they don't consider the fact that the biggest user of fossil fuels is the Pentagon. Yeah. And yet they're going to say, well, there's global warming, it's causing problems, there's going to be floods, and our responsibility is to go around the world, be the world's policeman. So that's our number one obligation. And therefore, if we can't move around and take care of all these problems, it's going to be a threat to national security. You know, that to me is a bit of a stretch, but I think there'll be a lot of people will fall for this and think, well, anything that's for national security, this is going to be very important. You know, this whole issue, though, bugs me, because I think it's so distorted on terrifying people about weather changes. But you know, if they look at history, geologic history, even before there were any significant human beings on the earth, the variations in temperatures were much, much greater. You had ice ages and hot ages and everything else. It looks to me that if you look at nature and what has happened, I would say the radical changes have been smoothed out. Matter of fact, climate change is sort of enjoyable. You know, when winter's ended, we all enjoy the spring. When the summer ends, we enjoy the fall. And yet they still turn it into a monstrous problem. But right now, I think they're on the short end of making their case, the people who want to terrify everybody. Because, you know, take for instance, they say what causes all these bad storms? Not global warming, bad storms. Well, go to Florida. They haven't had a significant hurricane hit them in 10 years. So I think this use of it for national security is one thing, but some of them even want to invite this issue of terrorism to it, that somehow it's connected to terrorism.
Yeah, this is the pro-climate change people want to frame it as a zero-sum game, that you either are with them or you're a climate denier. You deny that there's any change. And I don't think any rational person would deny, if we study history and geologic history, that there is change over the years. The question is whether they're right that our activities cause it, and whether they're right that our doing certain other activities will decrease it. But you know, it's interesting, you know, we looked at a Gallup poll taken last year about the priorities of Americans, the things that they're concerned about. And of 15 things, climate change was second to last. You know, people just don't care a lot about it. They're not worried about it. And so as you point out, what do they do to get people ginned up for this conference? They tied it to terrorism. You had Bernie Sanders said climate change is directly related to the rise of global terrorism. Obama says climate change, serious threat to global security, an immediate risk to our national security. Kerry's blamed the whole crisis in Syria on climate change. They had a couple of bad harvests, and that's why everything went south. It wasn't because of our intervention. It wasn't because of Assad must go. It's because they didn't have rain for a couple of years.
You know, what's interesting is they do use economics in their bad economic policy from this horrible weather is the reason people, resort to terrorism and military operations. But the whole thing is, these are the clowns who don't have the vaguest idea what a healthy economy is all about, and what happens when you have a healthy economy, how starvation was stopped, how even the early years in our history, how starvation regulation was a problem, and all of a sudden it ceased once they accepted private property rights. So they never talk about that. And here Sanders is out there, who's a socialist, who creates all the policies that create poverty and weak economy. So I think there is a significant relationship to these very, very poor nations, and they have these vicious dictators that we've influence and make our puppets, and the people get angry at it because I think economics is a driving force for people to have revolution, but the whole idea that we need more government is the reason. They should be looking for more freedom to find out if they want to connect it, but obviously their goal is to conflate the two issues.
So as you point out, if climate change and economy are important, one of the goals of this conference is to reduce economic activity that produces greenhouse gases or things of the like. Things like the American coal industry will be gone and this sort of thing. But how would you see, if they have their way and we reduce our economic activity to boost the earth, what would that do to our economy? What would you?
Well, first I'll make a positive prediction. The people will be so angry they're going to ignore everything the government does, and sometimes they get that way. But no, if this goes through, and most likely there will be a burden, and it would collide. They would come together with the natural correction that has to come, that has not, worked its way out. It tried to eliminate all the malinvestment and debt in 2008 and 2009, but that wasn't permitted. Now that burden is much, much greater. So if the correction has to come and the liquidation of debt has to come, at the same time they say the solution is more government, more regulations, and more subsidies to a whole industry. The industry that deals with global weather changes is a $1.5 trillion industry, and a lot of it, if not most of it, comes through taxes. And people get grants, they get to do promote certain alternatives. They feel the market is totally absent from it. So and they pretend if the government pays for it and they borrow the money or print the money, there's really not that much cost.
It's free.
So I think it's going to would be a devastating effect to the economy, and the two will come together. Matter of fact, they're together already. The economy is weak, and there are even Republicans that understand that super over-regulated EPA is very damaging to the economy, and that made that much worse.
Well, here's another thing you've always been concerned about. We read from this new plan, they hope to have a signed deal after this conference, and with 40,000 people attending for 2 weeks at how many millions of dollars, they'll probably walk away with something. But one of the points is that, this is different from the previous ones, because the previous ones they call a top-down approach, where nations would agree globally on a certain standard. This one they say is different because it's bottom-up. Nations will decide on a plan individually for themselves and bring it to the UN. But here's the kicker, and this goes into what you've been saying for years and years. Parts of the deal must be legally binding. So a supranational entity now will have legal control over the U.S. You can't be too crazy about that.
It's obviously an attack on national sovereignty, and that, of course, undermines our laws and undermines our Constitution, which we've been doing, for a long time. So I think part of this whole effort is to justify world government. Whether just the war on terrorism is a big issue. It's not, criminality, 130 people being killed, pretty disastrous. But it isn't the justification for a total world government, which is usually the cause of so many problems that we have. So you come along with problems like this, and we do have a problem. I think there's a significant problems in parts of the world, and we have had it in this country, and that is pollution. Because I happen to have lived in a city where pollution was horrible, and that was in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which got cleaned up before the EPA. But pollution is something, because I see it as a violation of property rights. And I imagine when there's a cloud hanging over a city, it might alter the temperature under that city. But I have not bought into this whole thing that anything that produces CO2, that CO2 has become a poison. I didn't learn that in medical school. Lots of normal natural things are poison when they're excessive. But that isn't what the case is here. Even pollution, I don't think, is just CO2. There's a lot of pollutants in there, you know, in the air that does this. But this to me, whether it's terrorism or whether it's the war on global warming and climate change, I think it's just more of a effort to have world government. And you talk about whether it's top down or bottom up, and they say, oh, this will be bottom up and we can represent ourselves. But what was our Constitution supposed to do? We were supposed to be almost essential independent nations, but that has been long gone. In an independent nation, the states should have had state sovereignty. But now, the feds always overrule. So what we say so often has so little effect on the government. But what I see coming is the national governments, especially ours, will become so inept that people are going to act on their own. They're getting together now. States get together and say, we're not going to enforce these particular laws. They're challenging it. And they're saying, we're not going to, have the federal government deal with where people are going to live, and they're going to subsidize people to come in and move in. That's what I think. But there's a bit of rebellion there. So, yes, it's very bad, this move to world government and authoritarianism. And when they see a problem, they just give us more of what caused the problem. But I think that you pointed out on the polling, American people aren't staying awake at night worrying about climate change and the temperature. They're worried about other things, and rightfully so. I think economics was on top of the list.
Number one.
Jobs. This is what it is. And this is what these people aren't dealing with. They don't want to talk about, well, how do you have jobs? Well, you get rid of the Federal Reserve, you balance the budget, you quit spending, you get the government out of our lives, you emphasize the principle of personal liberty and property rights and voluntary contracts, and just get out of the way, and people will have jobs, and the economy will boom. But they don't talk about that. They just talk about more and more, and always the attack is a sacrifice of personal liberty. But people who want world government aren't too interested in yours and my liberty.
Well, the people that go to these conferences are going to create a lot of jobs, very high-paying jobs for the elites. But the coal miners and people that are working down here, they're going to be out of jobs.
And they'll get poorer. That's why, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. If you still have a form of the market and you're on the right side of things, you get bailed out and you get the contracts. And the middle class and the poor, just look at the number of people, young people who are still living at home because they can't get a job and can't take care of themselves. And they think that, guys like Sanders thinks they're going to correct that, even though he says, yeah, that's a problem. So what we need is more of it. We need more spending. So that is our fight. This is the fight that we have, and it's been not new. It's been around for a long time, and that is individual liberty versus the state. And I think there's a healthy debate going on. I think our side of the argument is in the driver's seat. I think they're in the political driver's seat, and they have a lot of clout, but they're going to run out of issues. They're losing their clout. They're going to lose the money. They're going to lose control, whether they think they can drive it by, stirring up fear over terrorism that essentially is non-existent in this country. And if we just had a different foreign policy, we could solve that problem. The people are going to wake up, mainly because big government is totally inept, and they will fail, and that is why we should be prepared. We should be prepared by individuals, families, and local municipalities to be able to live together and work our way out of this. But most important is the issue of the ideas that we live by, the ideas and principles of personal liberty and property. This would go a long way to solving the problem. These kind of conferences, they're deadly in support of the tyrants and the authoritarians who just want bigger government, and that's what we have to expose. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report, and please come back soon.